Welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am Michele Rosenthal, and today I have hijacked the host seat so that we can turn around the whole setup and put your good friend and mine, Guy McPherson, into the hot seat himself. I think that this man has done so much to help the trauma community, to help the professional community, the survivor community, to disseminate information and education and learning. And that is one of my biggest passions. And it occurred to me, we don't hear from him enough. So today, this is all about the Guy Show. So Guy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Michele. I really appreciate you doing this. It's definitely different and it's intense. But thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've known you for over a decade, and I've seen the evolution of where you were a decade ago to where you are today, and the shifts and the turns in what you're doing and where your focus is. And I think it's so beautiful and it's so necessary. So let's start with, give me the big picture. What is your mission as of today? Because it has really morphed since I first met you. Tell me where you've landed and what makes it so meaningful to you.
Yeah, you're right. It has morphed. And not too many people have commented on that. So I appreciate you noticing that. You know, my mission really continues to be to raise the awareness of trauma, but also to honor the importance of genuineness, our own genuineness in that and in the healing process. I don't think that gets enough enough of the spotlight, and how, we always talk about being genuine and authentic, but really, what does that mean? And how the hell do you do it? And it's not always easy to do. So I've really focused on, whether it's the importance of cultivating genuineness for a therapist, and also the importance of cultivating genuineness in the therapeutic relationship and everything that means. And not just in the context of providing therapy with a therapist client, but in our own lives.
So true. And when you think about the fact that, I've heard the statistic, like 90% of the results that you get in the therapeutic environment come from the therapeutic relationship. Right. And as a trauma survivor myself, I know that the different people that I worked with, when I felt they really were genuine and authentic with me, I got so much farther because I felt like I was working with a real person. I could let down my mask because they had let down theirs. Right. And I know in my work now, when I work with survivors, the more authentic I am, the deeper the connection is, the higher we can go in our work together. So how do you mentor people, you coach professionals in doing this now. So what are some of your go-to strategies or suggestions for creating that authenticity? Because it can be very hard when you're in the authority spot. To be vulnerable enough to be authentic can be challenging. So how do you suggest that people approach that?
Yeah. So a couple of things here. First of all, I think for me, it's important to realize that authenticity is going to show up and be different for each of us, right? It's not one thing. You're going to show up differently, authentically than I am. And then that's even going to be more layered with different people, right? We're off different authentically with different people, and that's fine. When I was in fresh out of graduate school, not unlike a lot of people, I thought I needed to be a therapist, and what that was, and for me, it was being really educated and knowing and having all the answers, and it just got in the way, and I didn't realize it until I was working in a clinic. We were assessing and treating young kids who were showing early signs of psychosis, and these kids would walk in with a list of symptoms and crazy behaviors, and you'd look at this and you go, oh my God. And then a week later, the actual kid would walk in, and it would just be this kid with a book in it under their arm or a stuffed animal. You're like, what is going on here? And meanwhile, when we get into the office and we'd have to administer this protocol, this assessment which was like 40 pages long. And who the hell wants to listen to that? And at one point I realized I wasn't communicating with this one kid. It was just like I was getting these monosyllabic answers and nothing was happening. And I threw the assessment down on the table, and I just said, look, let's just stop this, put this down here. And in that moment, I just kind of broke the whole container in a sense. And I was just like, I said to them, I said, look, what is it that the people out there in the waiting room, your parents, the therapists that you've seen before, that what are they not getting that they need to hear? And I threw away the assessment, and I just started communicating from myself, not someone who knew all the. So it's a lot of, understanding that we're all going through something. And I think as you mentioned, from this place of authority, it's inherent within the therapist-client relationship. There's this imbalance, but it's so important, I think, to establish that we're all going through something. We're all human. You as an expert, you might have more information, and that's great, but how is that communicated? How are we communicating as a human being? That's kind of the tip of the iceberg to answer your question.
Yeah. And I think you bring up such a great point. I have worked with several therapists who were my clients, and they all expressed to me like they're healing their own traumas. But here's my question for you, because what I hear from them, and this is in the past couple of years, that they're very frustrated with the therapeutic model, the conventional therapeutic model. And a lot of them, since I'm trained in the coaching model, a lot of them are shifting to go get trained and certified as coaches, because they think that there's more of an opportunity for them to be who they want to be if they're in a coaching model versus a conventional therapy model. Are you witnessing that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a really good question. And it's a tough one, because the difference between, if you ask a therapist or ask a coach to describe the difference, it's very difficult. It's a very gray area, but there is a lot of leniency with coaches because of what you just mentioned. Eugene Gendlin, who founded, it's not tapping, but he was a very famous therapist, and he talks about, if the importance of us being genuine, if we had to be smart, or if we had to be completely educated and know all the answers, we couldn't do that. But we each can be ourselves. And that's easy or simple, but it's not easy. Why is it not easy? Because it means that you and I have to do our own work, that we have to take the time and explore what the hell we went through, how bullying jacked me up, how my anxiety continues to jack me up. And not that there's anything kind of wrong with that, but when we get in the room, as Lisa Ferenc said, if you're in the room and you're working with someone and you're dealing with your own stuff, at that point, you're in the wrong room. You need to work on that stuff before you get into that room. And a lot of people get into this field for great reasons. But as soon as you say, well, as soon as you turn the light on them and begin inviting them to explore their own stuff, it's like, whoa, I'm here to help this person. I'm here to help educate and guide this other person. And that's really challenging for us to do.
That is. And how do you think it combines with the desire to get results? Because do you think also like the desire to get results and to be the conduit of someone's transformation gets in the way of authenticity? Do you ever see that? Where someone's not feeling confident, I guess, in their abilities or not getting the results that they want. And so it impairs their ability to just be as authentic as you were in that moment. Like, let's just toss the assessment out and let's get real with each other. Do you see that?
Well, I think, results, that word has to be defined. What does it mean to get results? Why is someone going into this field in the first place? If they're going into coaching in the mental health space, because again, a lot of people want to help, they want to heal, they want to fix, they want to prevent their client from, or any other client from going through what they've gone through. And when in reality, as a lot of my amazing guests have said, it's not your job to fix someone. It's not your job to take away their pain. Right. And when I heard that, I was like, whoa, it's your job, they would say, to be there, to witness, to guide them. And that becomes a very different journey and a very different path. And what it means that one has to be willing, the therapist or coach has to be willing to acknowledge and accept that they don't have all the answers, that they might not have the results, when in reality, being able to empower the client to define and find those results for themselves.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Such a good point, because I think when we step out of our expectations or assumptions, we can get so much more authentic with people because we don't have an agenda. We're just being so present in the now, in that moment with them. And so let's flip to the other side. Like, we've been thinking about and looking at it from the professional side and from the survivor side, from the client side. What do you see? Why is it that you're so passionate about authenticity in terms of the survivor/client?
Because I think, first of all, for people who've experienced trauma, and specifically interpersonal trauma, to be in the room with someone who is authentic, who is genuine, is almost the antithesis of what they've experienced if they've gone through interpersonal trauma, right? When they most often, people who've experienced trauma of that type, their self-trust has been ripped from them. Their ability to be vulnerable and to trust another person has been ripped from them. And the power of being in the room and being in the presence of someone who not is some authority figure, but is genuine, is so friggin' inspiring and healing. Look, when you and I meet someone day to day, and we're in the presence of someone who's just themselves, they're not some crazy guru, but they're just authentic. They're themselves. They're genuine. They're able to honor their history, their processes. We feel it. It almost gives us permission to be ours. That is so healing. That's why it's so important to me. And it's also important to me because I did the exact opposite. I felt I needed to be, some idea of this therapist and have all the answers. And, clients would come in, and before they would come in, it's like, oh my God, this person's coming in. They have all, this symptom. I read that in Pat Ogden's book. I need to go figure that out. I'm gonna take these notes. You can't do that. We're not,
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. And I love the idea of kind of pulling apart, we all are so passionate about the work that we do. So we go through our trainings and whatever certifications and, degrees and licensures, whatever path people decide to take. And then you get into the room and you have to kind of let go of all of that and just figure out, how do I just be a person helping this person?
And that's challenging to do because, and listen, I'm not saying, I'm not discounting the benefits of education. Not at all. You've got to be educated, but like you're saying, to a certain degree, you can't have your suitcase filled with education clutched to your chest the way I did. It's like you've got to have it, by your side. But the thing is, I think, Michele, it's challenging for a lot of people because they have spent all this time and oftentimes a lot of money on all this education, and you feel you need to lead with that. And I thought you did too. But in fact, I think it's really the obverse. You need to lead with yourself. And again, I'm not saying you need to disclose everything and share intimate details about yourself, but you need to be able to find and connect with the person in front of you as a human being. Jesus Christ, we need that. That's what we need.
We do. So if you were going to say, trauma as an industry in the past 15, 20 years has had such a transformation. I mean, I'm thinking back in 1981 at the time of my trauma, nobody was talking about trauma. And then when I got into recovery at the end of the 90s, nobody was talking about it. My therapist didn't even know what PTSD was. And it turned out that was what I was struggling with. So then I feel like since maybe 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, I feel like the tide turned and books started coming out and speakers started emerging to really talk about what trauma is and PTSD and how we can actually heal it. It's not like this lifetime sentence. So I feel like if you and I look, and then the neuroscience just exploded to really show what was possible and what was really going on. So we could kind of detach and destigmatize the mystery around it all. So if you were going to look ahead now and say, okay, in the next 10 or 15 years, what's the next evolution in trauma-centered care? What would you say?
Wow, that's a really tough question. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with mentioning the neuroscience. I mean, that is becoming much more pronounced. I mean, then we have the whole field of psychedelics, how that's going to come into play. Yeah. I think that's becoming more and more recognized, the importance of that. The other part to that is the trauma in and of itself. It's like from time immemorial, there has been trauma. That's to me is going to be very interesting. The fact that it is becoming more and more understood and recognized and talked about. I'm very curious because of that, the role that's going to play in the prevalence of trauma. So that to me is people are still doing awful things to people, and I can't, it's so crazy. This field that you and I are both in, it's horrific. And from time to time, I can't believe that I'm still talking about this. So.
But you're not a therapist anymore, right? You're more like a coach to therapists.
I'm not a therapist. I'm a podcaster who talks to incredible people and talks about these topics and hopefully raises the awareness of trauma and raises the awareness of the importance of authenticity and cultivating that and what that means. That's what I am.
And you also call yourself a connector. So talk about that. Like, what does that mean in terms of what you do and what makes it so meaningful to you to be that? 'Cause I love that phrase, that word.
Michelle, that's an interesting point that you bring up. And it took me a while to kind of honor that because I've had a lot of failures in my life. I mean, I've tried to do a lot of things and have failed in that. But through that, there's always been this ability and love about connecting people and connecting my audience with the guests on my podcast. And it just has to do with the love of talking to someone and being able to hone in on their passion and why they're doing something, not so much their work in a sense or their book, but how the hell they got here. How the hell did you get through this? And I love doing that. And I love when one of my guests starts talking and they start going off in this tangent and I'm able to say, hang on a second, come back here. They just skip over those little seemingly insignificant details, which happen to be friggin' amazing. That to me is important because I think a lot of us don't honor those seemingly insignificant details that our the little journeys and big journeys we all go through. We need to hear that we're all going through these ups and downs. It's part of our process. All right, let's just pause here for a second to thank our sponsors. All right, we are back.
So let's take that as the little tangent and tell me one of your seemingly insignificant journeys that brought you to this moment.
Well, I'll tell you something. It's when I went to I'll make this quick. I got out of high school, went to what was Philadelphia College of Art for 1 year. So art school, dropped out, started playing music, stopped that, started writing fiction for like 7, 8, 9 years. And then I got a phone call. So I was about 30. I was out of school for like 18 years, was writing fiction. And I got a phone call from an old friend of mine. And she was calling people to tell them that she had been living with AIDS for 9 years and didn't tell a lot of people. And here I am, I'm on this phone call. I was done writing for the day, sitting down, and the courage in this woman's voice, the resolve, the ability to be able to talk about what she was going through just blew me away. I got off the phone and I was like, there's no way I have that courage. And it really made me think about where my own courage was, where my own guts were. And in that moment, I decided to stop what I was doing and to find it. So I went on these different courses. I went on this mountain climbing course and I went on this survival course out in the middle of the Utah desert. And I'm not a outdoor person at all, but in that course, that survival course, one of these participants got really sick, and myself and this other woman helped this guy. We dragged this guy. We encouraged this guy. And that was a moment where I was like, I want to help people in that type of situation, in that emergency, dire situation. So I came back and I said to myself, I'm going back to school. I want to become a doctor. I didn't say I was going to become a therapist. I said I was going to become a doctor. Why? Because I thought being a doctor would be the epitome. That's what I thought. And I got into a program, needed to finish my BA, and I started doing pre-med stuff. And Michelle, I sucked. I could not do it. But what I did do is I was able to talk to my colleagues about the shit they were going through. So much so that people would come up to me and say, Guy, you know what? I don't want to insult you, but have you ever thought about becoming a therapist? And I was like, no. And the other thing I did was I put together a whole program to help support non-traditional students who were going through the program to get into medical school. Meanwhile, I was tanking all of these courses, but I did do that. And I did get this crazy award for that, which was crazy, but I didn't honor that. I didn't honor what that process was. And that to me was a big turning point for me, because I failed in part at what I wanted to do, but I discovered something, that this connector part of me that that in a sense came really easy to me, but I didn't honor it and didn't think it had any worth.
Well, isn't that the biggest sadness? How often, and nobody tells you this when you're 5, 6, 10, or 15, which I wish they would, do the thing that comes easily, because
Right.
That's your path of least resistance, which is like the most glorious path to walk. It's the path of your most true self, where you don't have to work so hard. You're just naturally good at this thing. So what caused you to finally say, oh, well, I'm just naturally good at this, I may as well just do it?
I went through the program. I got my undergraduate degree. Medical school was not in the cards. And I said, okay, what can I do with this? And so I decided to pursue clinical psychology. And it wasn't until I got through that program and got a job, and the job I was talking about, we were assessing and treating young kids who were showing early signs of psychosis, that I saw day in and day out how many of those kids had experienced trauma that had gone undiagnosed by the teachers, by the therapists, by the parents. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is crazy. And something's got to be done here. So I decided to start a podcast. I mean, I've been commuting like literally an hour and a half, 2 hours each way in the car, listening to these podcasts, usually about entrepreneurs who were just like creating their own lives. And it was very empowering to me. And I started going through sensory motor psychotherapy program, and just felt I had a certain baseline of knowledge. Janina Fisher was a teacher at that point, and I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if Janina Fisher was here in the passenger seat, and she could coach me, and I could interview her. And I'd never started a podcast and never interviewed anyone, and that was it. And that's how I started.
Isn't it funny? It's the thing that you had no background, no training to do, podcasting, I mean. And it's the thing that really became the conduit for what you were meant to be doing.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It's crazy, and it's still morphing for me, Michele, and really that basis is for me to challenge myself to honor who I am and what that means, and it keeps opening up, and it keeps evolving, and I keep getting inspired. And that to me is the most important thing, because I'm becoming less and less concerned about how the perception I have of myself, and more concerned about, can I honor who the hell I am, and how can I work with that? How can I make a difference?
Well, how do you answer that?
By just challenging myself to honor my process and my story. I think a lot of us go through life, and therapists a lot too, as if we're holding this like glass ball, right? This amazing, beautiful glass ball. And if we make a mistake, it's going to fall out of our hands and crash. Or if we squeeze it too tight, it's going to crash. Or God forbid, if we, again, make a mistake and we have to toss it to someone, we're scared to interact with it. When in reality, for me, it's become more about this. Instead of this like beautiful glass ball, it's this like beautiful hunk of clay, and we can grab it, and when we do stumble, it's going to get marred, and it's going to be really cool, and we can throw it. And that honoring that, having my life be more about that, and it's, to me, there's a lot of power in that and empowerment, but it's not always easy. It's not easy, because I realize I am putting myself out there to a certain degree, well, to a large degree, but I want to be inspired to create a platform where we are genuine and we are authentic, and honor, with the realization that that's going to be different for all of us, what that looks like.
That's so true. So true. So I know we're limited on our time here, so I just have a couple of questions and then I'll let you go. With the caveat that, I might lasso you again. So
part one,
you have just, I love your vision and I love your dedication. So if you were going to offer like a how-to kind of process, like, I don't know, in like 3 steps or something. I'm circling back now to the beginning of our conversation. If there's a trauma therapist who's listening and really wants to be more authentic, but just doesn't, it's kind of like the theater, there's that fourth wall, and we're trained, I'm saying we, but I'm not really part of the conventional community, but I imagine you all are trained not to break it, because I have friends who were therapists and, they're very clear on, they're not supposed to talk about themselves and that kind of stuff. So if you were going to share some ideas about how to break that fourth wall with your client, how to cross that bridge into being more authentic and being comfortable with it, because those are 2 different things. You can tell someone how to do it, but that doesn't mean they're comfortable with it. Right. So what have you discovered that leads to that comfortability in that authentic space? And how would you recommend other people start to develop that?
Yeah. And I think, right, that's an excellent question. And I think it's going to be different for different people. Not everyone is going to be comfortable sharing information about themselves. And I think that's something that one needs to listen to. And again, it's very important, I think, for people to hear that this is going to be different for each person and with each client, right? We have different family members that we have different relationships with, et cetera, et cetera. But I think one thing is to understand is to have the understanding that the person sitting across from you doesn't want a modality. They don't want a treatment. They want a friggin' human being. Yes, they want to be helped, but they want a human being. And it's about understanding what you are comfortable with sharing, what you are comfortable with, what element, what bit, what snippet you are comfortable with sharing with the person in front of you in that moment, right? It's about being in the moment and understanding that this is not for you to prove that you're some genuine therapist, but it's about being able to connect with the person sitting in front of you. And it's going to be different for each person. But go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I would imagine, and when you're saying that it doesn't mean you have to reveal yourself so much as you just have to find a way to connect with them, to use the word that you have to be present. So right. Is authenticity, what's the hub of authenticity? Is it sharing and revealing yourself, or is it being present in the moment?
Well, it's your ability to be present will allow you and help you and determine how you can be authentic. And I think authenticity means being able to respond in the moment with yourself, with your being. Doesn't mean sharing intimate details about myself, but it might mean saying, Jesus, how did you go through? It might be the way you emote. It might be crying. It might be saying, Jesus, maybe other people wouldn't do that, or maybe you feel like you shouldn't do that because that's not going to be very therapy. It means being a human being in the moment. And of course, there are some guidelines with that because you are in a professional relationship. But that shouldn't, for me, it's about being a human being because we're going to connect with that.
I think that's gorgeous. And I think that's a great place to land. Being a human being in the moment. Is there any better description of how to help somebody?
Right.
Therapeutically or otherwise, but definitely, therapeutically. So, Guy, thank you so much for so authentically sharing yourself with me and your audience and letting us get to see you. You're always the man behind the mic, but it's nice to know the thoughts behind the man behind the mic. So thank you so much. And if people wanted to reach out to you or learn how to connect with you further, where would they do that?
Just through the Trauma Therapist podcast website or the Trauma Therapist Project website, they can do that. And how about for you? How would people going to find out about you?
And you're also on Twitter because
I'm on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, they can access that through my website.
Yeah.
But how about for you?
I'm Michele Rosenthal, trauma recovery specialist, and you can find me also on Twitter and at my website at mytraumacoach.com. So, Guy, thank you so much for letting me come and take over and really be able to shine the light on you because I have so much respect for you and such appreciation, not just for your mission, which is enormous and wonderful, and not just for the platform that you've created, but for the authenticity with which you do it. So thank you. Have a good night, a good day, wherever you are in the world. Enjoy.
Thanks so much, Michele.
Thank you.